So mote it be. Hello, my name's Chris, what's yours? Welcome back to Marathon Man, where I'm going through Doctor Who from the very beginning, and you join me at the end of Season 8. In the past, I've always felt a little bit guilty about how I feel about this one, because it feels very totemic among fans, if not one of Pertwee's best, then his very best. And when I first watched this story years ago, obviously I came to it privy to all of the hype, and I came away feeling a little bit let down. Not a sense of it being a particularly bad story, but just a massive sense of, was that it? And then the next time I watched it was part of the very first marathon I did, and if anything, it actually fell further from grace until, get this, once upon a time, this story was in my bottom 30 of all Doctor Who stories. And it did a little bit better on subsequent ones. It's just that even then, it never really actually clicked for me. Until the last marathon I did. I realised that I was wrong, and that yes, the Daemons is one of Pertwee's best. And are we saying Daemons or Demons? I know that technically I suppose we should say Daemons, but I've always said Demons. I guess. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to keep saying Demons. And if you feel like you want to correct my pronunciation, just take count of how many times I say Demons, and then correct it that many times in the comments below. Now, just because the last time I watched it, I realised, oh, this is actually brilliant and it's one of Pertwee's best, does not mean that I would feel the same this time. As we know, I've said before that this marathon is basically, it's why I marathon. I always watch Doctor Who from the very beginning because it always feels like a fresh start, and opinions can change, and my estimations of stories have gone up, they've gone down, so there's no guarantee that I would feel the same again this time. And to be honest with you, because of that, I was a little bit nervous about reaching this one, just in case I reverted back to, oh, this story's not all that great, and then having to tell you all that. But, needn't have worried, this one is still absolutely brilliant. The way this story opens is unlike anything we've had in the show up until this point. After 8 seasons of it, when something starkly different hits you in the opening few seconds, you cannot help but take notice and appreciate the difference. That's the case here, because they're definitely seeming to be going for Doctor Who as Hammer Horror. Stormy night, owls, an eccentric local insisting to the village GP that he died of fright, Doctor. And now that they've done it, it's a take on Doctor Who that becomes slightly tricky to fathom why they hadn't tried it before this point, because it fits like a glove. It's moody, it's atmospheric, and it's British as hell. And this filter applied to Doctor Who can only be a good thing, and it tells the viewer to sit up and take notice. And in fact, I might go as far to say this might be the best opening to any Doctor Who story at this point on the marathon. It has great ambience, and when you consider that this is a family tea time show, the fact that this opening could easily have just been just ripped out from a British horror film at the time, admittedly without any gruesome blood being spilt or sizable pubic thatches showing up, it adds to, it just creates a really confident tone more than anything else, and a pretty uncompromising tone, except they have compromised on the gruesome blood and sizable pubic thatches. Add to that the fake TV show, which is done very well and offers a massively economical way of getting in a lot of setup, and we are off to a blinding start, to the point where I wish I could go back in time and call myself names for not appreciating it this much before. I don't know, was I trying to prove something, or was I just being needlessly contrarian? I get that sort of opinions change and everything, and I'm not saying I was wrong to question its gilded status without having seen it, because it is healthy to question those things and go in with an open mind, but to write off all of this excellent work to the extent that I did, it just feels like insanity. It's a technique which can be used pretty inelegantly, the fake TV news report, and it's something that Russell T Davies, in my opinion, came to overuse. But here, it flies lovely. It lands really nicely, mainly because of a lot of the humour that is imbued in it. The Professor's withering nature is brilliant, and his nonplussed attitude at being interviewed on the telly, even though that's what he admits he wants on account of selling his book, really helps create a fun interplay with the TV presenter. So, not just using the device of the TV report to info dump, but also using it to generate some gags is an excellent move. When asked what to do if the devil shows up, the Professor so wonderfully replies,
"Get your chatty friend over there to interview him."
It's an absolute hoot. As a side note, considering that the production team is once again reiterating the idea that this isn't present-day Earth, more the day after tomorrow, the fact that the channel that the TV programme is going out on is BBC Three, I feel like I should draw parallels with that and then what the output of the real BBC Three eventually became. Its demographic being 16 to 34-year-olds and seeing all of its content move online a few years ago before since returning to broadcast has meant that BBC Three has become a bit of a derogatory term in my line of work. The implication being that if you're a bit BBC Three, then you're aiming too low. Which is nonsense, of course, because if you actually look hard enough, then the content on BBC Three is just as varied as any other BBC channel. It's just that BBC Three historically never made any bones about who it was aiming its content at. Much like BBC Four. Anyway, what I think I'm reaching for here is that while the Professor's dig may look like it's better suited to something on BBC Four, there's actually something quite anarchic about the presenter's manner and approach to live TV. Which results in no airs and graces from his interview subject. And it makes me feel like this guy's MO is to sort of like subversively approach a topic that's usually considered stuffy, and therefore actually ends up being a perfect fit for BBC Three. So it doesn't detract from that idea of the day after tomorrow. I know that BBC Three became something different to how the Daemons imagines it. It's just that it doesn't actually feel like that out of place to me. So I buy it. And I know that's a slight digression, but I did want to address the fake TV program in the Daemons because I actually think it's one of the strongest examples of that storytelling device I think I might have ever seen. As for the rest of the story, well, it continues apace and dares to prove me wrong with my long-held opinions about it. It's a lot lighter, breezier, and just more fun than I used to think it was. Miss Hawthorne is a big part of this because she's such a different kind of character from what we may be used to in Doctor Who that she can't help but entertain. And when the Doctor has been derisory about the occult to Jo and Yates before then in actual fact siding with Miss Hawthorne when he gets an inkling as to what's going on, it's a very effective hook in dragging our beloved regulars, and Mike, into the story. Once at Devil's End with the stakes set up as very high and the Doctor acting with all of his blustery and authoritative might, something unexpected happens and we get some jokes at his expense. And this has been sorely missing, and it helps to act as a spoonful of sugar if the Doctor, which this one can sometimes do, is ever acting a bit too forthright. So when he's the urgent and stern man of action demanding to know a bit of information before it's too late, we don't just have him shouting at people. We have a barfly thinking that he's wearing a wig. It is sublime in puncturing that slightly less than friendly streak of the Doctor's character that I've been reacting so negatively to in recent stories. And because of that, I greatly appreciate it. And it's only one example, really. There's a lot of fun stuff going on here. Morris dancing in all its British weirdness becomes rather sinister, and when we discover that the Master is in fact a pillar of the community and has rather loyal followers in the townsfolk, it all starts to feel very Wicker Man in the best possible way. And this predates the film The Wicker Man. With everything set up and feeling rather uneasy, we have the complete chaos of that first cliffhanger as everything goes mental and the pace is picked up. There are so many good ideas in this story and they are all done incredibly well. The heat shield around the village is achieved very, very capably indeed, and it offers scope for some lovely problem solving between the Doctor, the Brigadier and Sergeant Osgood. Now, Sergeant Osgood emerges as a rather sweet character and memorable enough to fans for a future showrunner to suggest that another character is possibly related to him. And after becoming arguably a little bit too much part of the furniture, unit here are used better than they have been in a really long time. And it's nice to see Benton and Yates in their civilian clothes, even though Yates still doesn't manage to look particularly comfortable in anything. No, I'm still not keen on Yates, I'm afraid to say, but Benton here is given so much more to do than usual, and it's lovely to see. And if spending more time with Yates means that Benton is better than he has been before, then that's a trade-off I reluctantly will accept. Their ruse to prove that the Doctor can do magic to the people of the village by Benton shooting things that the Doctor wills to move is a really nice example of them working together as a team, and it actually, I think maybe for the first time this era, actually galvanizes them as, forgive the pun, a unit. Plus, we get to see them more as people than usual, instead of just sort of like militaristic stereotypes. So, for example, the brig gagging for a pint is like, it doesn't feel like a departure, but it's a side to him we haven't seen before. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's in keeping with his character, yet we haven't seen much of his character beyond being the Brigadier. So it just works really nicely. And like I say, it humanises these characters that we've come to know far more than we've been used to. And that works wonders. Jo feels more integrated as well. And even though she has to become a sacrificial lamb and subsequently bordering on something of a cliche, she still gets some more interesting stuff to do, which Manning tackles superbly. She is so brave when she asks Azal to kill her rather than the Doctor, overtly willing to sacrifice herself for him, then giving her a huge moment such as this. It almost feels like compensation for much of her regrettable treatment up until now. I mean, it leads to her saving the world and to the defeat of Azal, which in turn leads to the capture of the Master, and she was willing to lay down her life to protect him, and yet the Doctor still truly doesn't really properly say thank you. So it could definitely be better, and I still feel a little bit like Jo is consistently getting the shitty end of the stick. But it is a considerable step in the right direction. And it is a shame then that earlier on the Doctor jumps down Jo's throat for deriding the Brigadier in exactly the same way as he himself just did. That doesn't get in my way of enjoying the Demons anymore these days by any means. It's just that it's the sort of thing I'd like to see the back off completely. Yes, he's very, very fond of Jo and he shows tenderness and compassion to her a lot of the time. But these little examples of where he doesn't aren't excused because of the benevolence he bestows on her for most of the time, because that's normally the excuse of the abusive party in an abusive relationship, to make the other one feel special and cared for in the times when they aren't belittling them and making them feel like shit. So I am still slightly concerned by this facet of the Third Doctor and how quick he is to be able to employ it. So I'm keeping my eye on him as well. And to refer this back to the character, like I said in The Mind of Evil, that the First Doctor was perfectly capable of being a bastard, gaslighting his companions, abducting them, being willing to cave in a caveman's skull. It's just that was the Doctor before Ian and Barbara had really imprinted themselves on his character, and we've moved on from there. The Doctor doesn't do that anymore. Which is why it sort of doesn't land as well when Pertwee does it. The tension between the Doctor and Ian and Barbara, because of some of the unsavoury elements of the Doctor's character, was part of why those early episodes were so strong. And it's partly why the Doctor is so heroic now, because he sort of sorted that out. So when these things happen, yes, they're not as bad as abducting your companion or caving in a caveman's skull, or being willing to. Not as bad as that, but they're still sort of like such a stark regression from where the Doctor should be at this point, and where he is a lot of the time, that it's noticeable. I can't ignore it when I'm watching these stories, and they are, when they do happen, a small but very real disappointment. Luckily, when he faces off against Azal, it brings out the best in him. It is a great scene, especially when Azal reveals that he is going to give his power to the Doctor, only for him to scream that he doesn't want it. And it's moments like this that make the unpleasantness of the Doctor stick out all the more. The twattiness is certainly in the minority, and most definitely incongruous, which only makes it more jarring for me when it happens. So despite my concerns about that in particular, and quite opposed to my previous appraisals of it, the Dæmons is fantastic. And having ticked off the 300 episode mark, where we've passed 303 episodes and 8 full seasons now, I'm glad to report that season 8 finished on a considerable high. So after a considerably bumpy start to Season 8, I can now say I've firmly reconciled with a story I used to have so very, 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 very wrong.
No! No, I don't want it!
That unfortunate moment where the Doctor tells Joe off for agreeing with him.
You'll do no such thing, Lethbridge Stewart. Of all the idiotic suggestions.
Of all the idiotic plans, as if blowing things up solves anything.
Joe, the Brigadier is doing his best to cope with an almost impossible situation. And since he is your superior officer, you might at least show him a little respect.
As ever, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this Morris Dance of Mayhem, then you know how YouTube works. Please do hit the like thumb, and why not fling out a share or two. And what do you think of this one? Does it finish Season 8 on a high, or is it undeserving of its reputation? Is it the greatest Pertwee story of all, or are there far better ones? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you back here soon for a recap of Season 8. So, if you don't want to miss that, hit the subscribe button, clang the cloister bell, and I will see you soon.